Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. And on today's video we're going to be revisiting the GL1000 Goldwing clocks. And if you've watched one of the previous videos on the playlist in the series that I've been doing, you'll know that I've already tested these in as much as I've connected a drill to the back of them with the Speedo cable and the taco cable, and the needles do work, and the dials, the odometer, etc. do go round, and I can reset the trip as well. So I'm happy that the units themselves are working. However, cosmetically there's several things wrong. These dials have blue faces, and the 1975 and the 1976 GL1000 didn't have blue faces, they had green faces. So the fuel gauge I've got is green, and that is correct. So I need to find a way of replacing these faces with green faces. The black around here is meant to be a satin black like this, so that should be simple enough to sand and repaint. The glass itself on both, or on all three dials in fact, is in good condition. The back of the case is obviously quite badly corroded, but there are chrome shields, if you like, for want of a better word, like a sort of bucket, if you like, that this sits into, and forms the back of this and covers all this up. So I'm not too worried about the way this looks. Once I get it applied, depending on how far I've stripped it, I may well treat this, but so I'm not too worried, because they will sit in the binnacle, whatever you want to call it, that sits over there, and they're away at the chromers at the moment, being chromed. So that'll be fine when it's done. So just to give you an idea of what I'm going to attempt to do with these, the idea is to get these apart, and then once they're apart is to replace these take it all apart. This says it's done 42,000 miles. Now this bike, when I bought it, is a total unknown quantity. I know these are the wrong clocks for the bike, so I know that 42,000 is probably incorrect anyway. I've got no MOT history with this. It was bought in boxes. I've got no previous MOTs. There's nothing online as far as MOTs go, because it hasn't had one since that system came into place. Yeah, so my thoughts at the moment are, if I can, to actually reset all these to zeros and start from scratch, because although I'm not necessarily rebuilding the engine from scratch, I feel I'm justified in resetting all those to zeros, because I am restoring the rest of the entire bike, and a fair, certainly the top end of the engine at least. And I'm not intending to sell the bike, and I'm not trying to suggest to anybody that it's done a mileage that it hasn't. I'm just resetting them because ultimately, if there was history, if the bike had history and I could see on MOTs what it had done and all the rest of it, that's a different story. But as it happens, there's no information at all on the mileage this bike has done. So as I'm doing a ground up restoration, I'm thinking reset that to zero. At least then I know how many miles I've done on it since I've restored it. And I'm not intending to go and sell this bike. I'm doing this one for me. So yeah, moving on. The idea is that the little screws inside there, which are corroded slightly, holding the dial on, they'll get repainted. The needles normally have red tips, so if you can just see those, they do have, but they're very badly faded. The red line marker there, that will get replaced anyway, because I'm going to put a new dial on. Now when I say I'm going to put a new dial on, what I mean by that is online you can buy these dials or overlays as they call them, and I'll show you those now. So if I just move these out of the way for a minute. So basically what I've done is I've ordered these online from a company called Classic Gauges, I think they were called. Yep, Classic Gauges. And what you get are a set of overlays for all of the dials, which I haven't actually taken these out and had a look at these. So I suppose are better. I've got quite a nice clean cloth here ish. When I actually come to do this, I'll probably do this indoors where it's much cleaner, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so although we don't necessarily need the fuel gauge, it did come with an overlay for that, and you can see that's pretty accurate. The lettering's slightly heavier possibly, but that's going to sit in there quite nicely. So we've got fuel, we've got the green temperature gauge for inside the dial below the main dial there, and that's got locating holes on there as well. We've got the fuel gauge itself, which again looks to me like a pretty good replica of what's in there. Slightly lighter green, but the ones I've seen where the green is in good condition on original ones are more like that green than they are that. So I'm actually thinking that is either reproduction itself or possibly that's faded, but that looks pretty good to me. They were very obviously green when you look at them. And then we've got the standard temperature, and you could this gauge, you can specify this in kilometers per hour rather than mile per hour, if that's what your gauge is. I asked this one to be in mile per hour, and I also asked it to have the red line where the 70 is, because on the UK model that would have been how it came, and this is a UK model bike. It's not a I mean, obviously it is an import from Japan, but it was first registered in the UK, so it never went anywhere else first. So it was in mile per hour, but it wasn't the American spec bike in mile per hour, which wouldn't have had the 70 marked as red. So that's what I've gone for. So yeah, that's what you get in a packet. These things aren't particularly expensive, and they're readily available from online sellers. I went with this particular make just based on the fact that they've got good feedback. I know people that have used these before, so they can go back in there nice and safe, because I think it's going to be a little while before we get around to using those, because we've got a fair bit of prep to do in the first place. Obviously we've got to get these apart, we've got to zero things, we've got to paint this, etc, etc. So these do come with instructions, which is quite nice, on basically how to get these bezels off, how to get them apart. So I'm going to have a read through this, and then I'll take a view on whether I've got the right kit to do that, if I need to make any changes, or how I'm going to handle it. And then yeah, we'll take it from there and we'll see how we get on. So first job is to get this bezel off, or get this cover off of the back, and basically this ring that goes around here is pushed over the top to hold this on. So all you can do really is to prise that up all the way around until you can pull this off. Now the instructions do suggest that you can put a circlip all the way around this, and possibly even on the bezel itself, so that as you lever it up it doesn't misshapen this. I've had a look, I haven't got anything close that'll fit that, so we're just going to have to go for it, I think. I would, looking at the state of this all the way around here, this has been off before. Don't quite know why somebody would have had it off before. I suppose I can understand perhaps why they've had that one off if they were messing with the trip or the odometer, but don't really understand why they've had this one off. I mean, I suppose it could just be that's how it is in the factory, but I can't imagine it was. There's big chunks missing out of some of the metal rim around here. So I'm literally going to have to just get a screwdriver and put the screwdriver in under the bezel, just there, and literally just very, very gently go round and just force this up until I get to the stage where I can literally separate these. So I shall carry on doing that, and I shall probably see you in a couple of hours. Okay. Okay. Right. So we have successfully, zoom that out a little bit. We have successfully separated the bezel and the glass from the rest of the clock. So what we've got is a lip here, and over that lip sat this metal band, which actually is separate to this. I thought it was part of that, but it's not. It's separate. So you can see it turning. So that is the bit that ultimately gets damaged. Hopefully you can see on the edge there it's all damaged, unfortunately, where it's had to be levered up. Thankfully on this particular one it doesn't seem to have damaged any of the edge, or the edge is all dirty and needs cleaning up anyway, clearly. But that's easy enough to do. So I'm hoping that when we come to put this back together, we can reuse this. The nice thing about this being separate to this bezel is it means I can take it off with a bit more work. I'll be able to get that off completely, so I can paint this. I need to do a bit more work. Oh, there's a little rubber sealing ring in there as well, by the looks of it. I'm assuming this is the original colour inside this, and the glass is sandwiched in. Let's have a look. Yeah, what feels like a piece of rubber around the edge of the glass, then the glass itself is held in with this ring, which I'm assuming is a push fit in there once. It may come out once this other ring's off here, but I don't necessarily need to disturb that. It's not like I've got to change the glass or anything. I just need to clean the glass. So okay, so that's good. I'm happy with that. Next job is to remove the needle, but the instructions for this particular set, obviously the needle itself rests against that little pin sticking up there, and what it suggests is you've got to find the natural resting position of this needle before taking it off, which isn't actually against that rest. It's going to be further down this way. So it suggests that we carefully lift the end of this up over the pin, and then let go. And basically what it's saying is that where that stops there, that's its natural rest position. That's important because when we've taken the needle off and we've done all the gauge and we come to put the needle back on, we need to put the needle back exactly there and then lift it back over the pin. So what we need to do is mark that now. No point marking it on this gauge because that's going to be covered up. So we need to mark it down here when we're directly on top of it. So I've got, this is meant to be a black Sharpie marking pen, but I think it's all but worn out. Oh no, it's working. So that's basically in the center of that. So if you could, all you could see there was my head, but that is that mark now, which I've just done with a standard Sharpie pen, which shouldn't rub off, is exactly where we need to put that needle back on. Right, now we've marked that, time to get the needle off, and that's done with 2 screwdrivers under the near the spindle or on the spindle, and then lever the indicator arm up, and hopefully it'll come off the spindle without too much trouble. I think I might use a bigger screwdriver there, and I just got to be careful this doesn't go flying off somewhere. So even pressure on both sides of this, hopefully. That is quite tight on there. I'm going to go for some bigger screwdrivers. My main concern with what I'm doing here is, as I'm trying to force this up off the spindle, these sides are flexing, and this is only made of a sort of a plastic. I'm just concerned I'm actually going to break this, but hey ho, let's see how we go. Let's have another go. Oh, okay, hopefully. Right, yes, that's worked. Okay, that has actually broken it away from the spindle without damaging the spindle. I don't know whether you'll be able to see that. Look at that up there for you. That's in focus, hopefully. So that's just a little hole in the end of there. So this will be cleaned up. I'll have a look at some pictures, but I think this was a sort of quite a bright red on the tip here, and that I think in the centre is meant to be white, so hopefully that'll clean up. I can always use a bit of Umbro enamel paint on this if I need to, so I can go in there. Okay, next job is to actually get the gauge itself off. Now that's just held on with 2 tiny screws. That one's in quite good condition. That one is corroded. I'm going to use my GIS screwdriver on these. I don't know whether they're GIS screws. I'm assuming they are, but I haven't got a posi drive that small anyway. I've got a Phillips that small anyway. I've got a posi drive, but they definitely would have been posi drive. So I'm going to go. Actually, I have got a set of jeweler's screwdrivers. Thinking about it, I did actually used to work on clocks many years ago. It was my original apprenticeship was at a company called Gent Limit in Leicester, and it was all about clocks, big industrial clocks, timing clocks, sort of clocks you'd see up on the faces of churches in the UK, that type of thing. So we never worked on anything quite this small, but the principles are basically the same. Anyway, the point is I do have some jeweler's screwdrivers, which I can find out if I need to. I can find if I need to, but that seems to fit in there pretty well. Hopefully you can see what's going on. Okay, that was come undone nice and easily. Very tiny little screw in there, and let's hope this one will come out just as easily. It's a bit stiffer, but it's turned. Okay, that one's going to need cleaning up and painting looking at that. Right, now this dial should lift off. As you can see it, there's a little bit of pink just on there. Whether that's where it's corroded underneath or whether it was some kind of glue holding it on, I don't know. If we turn that over, you can see what it is. It's just almost like a piece of plastic or Bakelite. Interestingly, that green on the back is very similar to the green, probably is the green that the original 75-76 gauges would have been. So maybe all they did was they screen printed the numbers straight onto the base colour on the early ones, and then the later ones, for some reason, they decided to start painting them blue. Okay, But anyway, that's that out of the way. So that's the next part of the puzzle. Now, of course, on this one, it's not like the Speedo where we've just got the single dial. We've also got this dial under here which we need to replace. And again, of course, we've got a nice little needle here for the temperature gauge just here, which I really don't want to disturb unless I absolutely have to. He says poking it with a screwdriver. Right, I think, looking at that, if I undo those two screws, that plate should just slide straight out this way, I think. And then I won't have to disturb anything that's under there. It's obviously, you know, this is a clock mechanism after all. We've got hair springs down in here. You know, we've got what effectively is a rheostat down inside. I don't know if you can see that in this light, but there is a rheostat. You in focus yet? Rheostat down in there. So we've got two very thin wires that come off and go to a little PCB, which then goes to these two wires here, which then obviously go off to the temperature sender. And as the resistance on the sender alters, this wire will get hotter or cooler, and that's what bends this plate in here, and then the whole arm moves backwards and forwards. So it's obviously a very precise mechanism. You wouldn't normally be expected to take these apart unless you have special equipment to set them up, but if we're careful and we don't disturb anything, we should be okay. So let's undo these two screws next. I'm trying not to get in the light here so you can see what's going on. Okay, they're the same length as the other ones. Just check. Yep, they are. So we don't need to worry about keeping those two separate. Okay, at least it's nice and clean in here, so we haven't, it's not as though we've got to do any work as far as cleaning all this out goes. I do actually have some old jeweler's clock oil from back in the day when I used to do this as a job. So oh, that's how that came off then. So I might actually put a little bit on those springs, or sorry, on these jewels, but we'll see how we go. I don't think this is jeweled actually. I called it a jewel, but I don't think it is. It's not like a watch. So that's that one done. And then really it's a question of repeating that same process on the Speedo. So, okay, with the Speedo, we've got the added complication of the trip reset, and on some I've seen, in the end there's a screw you can undo and this just comes off. On this one there's no screw in there that I can see, so it's either glued on, and I've tried to pull it off, so I've come to the conclusion I'm just going to damage it if that's the case. So what I've done is I've loosened all this bezel just as I did with the taco, and I can now carefully lift this off. I can't get this out with that. I can get this out with that on. Okay, I tried that just now off camera, it didn't work. Absolutely typical. So, alright, fair enough. What I was about to say to you though, is if you can't get it out, and you might not be able to, because actually on this one, you can see there's a rubber grommet, and it's perished on this one and fallen out, and you can get replacements of those. So I will be doing that. But to save you any possible headaches in the future, the idea with this one is that you turn it that way, so towards the front of the bike if you like, and you can reset this. If you turn it that way, it's actually meant to unscrew, but all that's happening here is that the shaft is turning. So I haven't tried this, but I'm pretty sure if I grip that silver shaft in there and turn this, hoping this is gonna, yeah, so that is now unscrewing. Okay, so that's the way to get that off, although say this one did happen to come out the side of the case, which I suppose is fine. But if you've never done this before, you just don't know. Okay, so I'm going to do the same as I did to the other one. Take the needle off, or get the needle set. So let's just show you that. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to move this very, very carefully over that stop, and we're going to let it come to rest where it wants to, and we're going to mark that again with the pen, which is about there, like so. But I know I'm about 3 or 4 mil away from the needle on both of them, so that's fine. If I've got, I'm coming to the conclusion that I don't think I'm going to be able to leave this. I'm just not the sort of person who's going to end up being able to put this back together and leave it looking like that. I'm pretty sure that once these dials are off, having had a look at the other one, that these screws are all pretty obvious and all this comes out. There's only 2 more screws, and the whole of the mechanism itself comes out of this case. I think I'm going to end up zinc plating these myself, because I just can't leave them like that. Even though they're going to go in a nice chrome bezel and everything, I'm just going to be thinking to myself, I know what they look like inside. So yeah, there you go. I am going to do it. I'm going to take those off. I will take that out completely, and I'll redo these. So adds to the work, but at the end of the day, if you're going to do it, do the job properly. Right, the fuel gauge slightly different, because I've followed the same process of getting the bezel off, and this one's come away with the fuel part of the fuel gauge there, and obviously the rest of it's in there. So that's fine. We've got that one. We can replace that. The glass is in good condition, so that's fine. Now, to get this part out, so I can put the sticker, the overlay on there, I've really got to take the mechanism out of this, because I think I don't want to disturb that needle, apart from putting a bit of red paint on the end of it. But if I undo those 2 little screws there and there, I don't think I'm going to be able to get that off very easily, so I'm going to have to take this out anyway. I say, looking at the back of this, like I said earlier, I'm just going to redo these anyway. I can't bring myself to leave them like that. So this is a slightly strange arrangement on here. There seems to be a nut, a washer, a spacer, and then maybe a lock nut and another nut and that. So this is a typical sort of small instrument arrangement with all this gubbins on there. Whether it's needed, I don't quite know. I'm trying to work out how. I can't remember what the loom looks like, and I can't remember how the connectors connect onto this, unless these sit down and just, I don't know. In fact, because this was all off the bike when I got it, it doesn't matter. The diagram will make it all clear, I'm sure. The point being that now, hopefully, yeah, that entire mechanism will carefully lift out of there. That's good. That means we can plate that. I think this sort of green, it's not a paint, it's almost like a wax that's gone on there at some point, is just to say that this has all been perhaps calibrated and put together properly. And again, we've got this situation where we've got a very intricate mechanism with what effectively is this winding of wire all the way around here, and the 2 wires which go onto these screws, which are effectively the electrical connectors. and this is effectively a bimetallic strip from what I can tell. Is it a bimetallic strip? Let's get your facts right, Steve. Let's have a look, see how this works. Yeah, it is a bimetallic strip. So basically what happens, and this is pretty old school to be fair, it doesn't get much older than this when it comes to this sort of thing. That strip of wire, as the current runs through the wire gets hot. And the hotter it gets, the more the strip of metal it's wound around starts to bend. The metal, it may well be two, in fact it is, I can tell it is, it's two different metals which are basically bonded together, and one of the metals will expand at a quicker rate than the other. So the metal on, let's see which way around it goes. Okay, so the metal on the outside of this expands at a higher rate than the metal on the inside. I don't really know if I'm explaining this very well or whether you can see even, but as I move that, if you watch that piece of metal in there, as I move the lever, you can see the metal moving, but actually what it's really doing is bending, or it would be bending if that was getting hotter, and that is basically how that works. Anyway, electromechanical lesson over. The point of taking that apart is that I can now very carefully, it says after messing around with the lever, very carefully undo these two screws, which will then allow me to take this green bezel off, which will be the final bezel I have to remove before we start thinking about, careful with the needle, Steve. Now that needle is right in the way of that screw, so I'm just going to gently hold that out of the way. You've got to be so careful not to deform any of these little spindles and springs, etc. You'll never get them back to where they're supposed to be. No, without special spring gauges and all sorts of things. Okay, there we go. So that's our last gauge out of there. You go. That's a better view of that now. I should have shown you in the first place. So as I say, as this needle moves, if you watch that strip there, that strip is basically bending. It's not bending, it's actually moving because I'm moving the needle instead of the strip. But if it was getting hot, that piece of metal would be bending, and that would be, therefore, because it's connected to that, would be moving that around or moving that across that way. So that's how that works. I'm going to drop that very carefully without touching any of those wires. Oops, wrong way around. Back into there for now, because I don't want any of that to get damaged. Okay, so that's it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed that, and hope it's been informative. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe down below, and I will see you in part 2 of this video.